In the heart of Boston's oldest fire station, veteran firefighter Mike Sullivan quietly counts quarters for his bus fare home. His colleagues snicker behind his back, the perpetually broke hero who can't seem to catch a break. But on this rain-soaked autumn evening, as the ancient station bell tolls, none of them realize they're about to receive a guest who will change everything. Through the mist steps a rain-drenched stranger in an impeccably tailored suit, seeking shelter from more than just the storm. What begins as a routine night shift is about to become the story that rocks two nations and proves that true nobility isn't found in a crown, but in the heart of those who serve. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable tale, tell me where you're watching from, and if this story of unlikely friendship touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode will reveal a royal secret that changes everything. Mike Sullivan's weathered fingers traced the tarnished brass frame on his locker, fingertips lingering on the photograph of his father in his own firefighter's uniform, circa 1975. The same proud stance, the same station house behind him, Engine Company 61, Boston's oldest continuously operating firehouse. 3 generations of Sullivans had opened this same locker, adjusted the same brass pole, answered the same bell's call. But times had changed. His father had retired with a pension that kept him comfortable. Mike, at 48, counted quarters for bus fare and brought peanut butter sandwiches while his colleagues ordered takeout. Not that he begrudged them their choices. Each man dealt with the weight of the job differently. "Hey, Sullivan!" Jimmy Martinez's voice echoed through the locker room. "We're getting Thai, want in, only $20 each." Mike's hand instinctively went to his wallet, though he already knew its contents. "Thanks, but I brought lunch." "Again with the PB&J?" Jimmy shook his head. "Come on, man. Live a little." The concern in Jimmy's voice was genuine, which somehow made it worse. Mike managed a smile. Maybe next time. He didn't mention the stack of medical bills waiting at home or Sarah's latest treatment costs. His sister's multiple sclerosis wasn't their burden to bear. Besides, he had his father's voice in his head. A Sullivan stands on his own 2 feet. The station itself seemed to understand, its ancient brick walls holding decades of similar stories. The brass pole gleamed dully in the afternoon light, polished by generations of sliding hands. The worn floorboards creaked their familiar symphony under his boots as he made his way to the kitchen. Captain Rodriguez looked up from his paperwork as Mike entered. "Sullivan, you're on inventory today. The audit's coming up." "Yes, sir." Mike welcomed the task. Methodical work helped quiet his mind, and he knew every piece of equipment like an old friend. Each oxygen tank, every length of hose, all the specialized tools, they were more than just items to check off a list. They were the difference between life and death. In the equipment bay, he began his count, the meditation of it, noting each item, checking pressure gauges, inspecting seals, brought him back to watching his father do the same thing 30 years ago. Back then, he thought his dad was just being fussy. Now he understood the devotion behind such dedication. A burst of laughter from the kitchen made him pause. Through the doorway, he could see his colleagues clustered around smartphones, showing each other vacation photos, planning weekend trips. Good men, all of them. They'd run into a burning building for him without hesitation, but they lived in a different world, one where credit cards weren't maxed out on medical bills, where choosing between bus fare and lunch wasn't a daily calculation. The ancient station bell chose that moment to toll, its deep resonance hitting him in the chest, just as it had the first time he'd heard it as a child. 4 rings. Shift change approaching. Soon the night crew would arrive, and he'd head home to his small apartment, to the stack of bills, to the weekly call with Sarah's doctors. But first, he had his inventory to complete. Each item carefully noted, each safety check performed with the same attention he'd give to his own equipment before entering a burning building. Because that's what Sullivans did. They did the job right, no matter who was watching. The setting sun painted the station's worn brick walls with streaks of amber and gold, casting long shadows through the high windows. Outside, the first hints of autumn crept into the air, carrying the promise of rain. Mike zipped up his faded department-issued jacket, the same one he'd had for 8 years now, and tried not to think about how soon he'd need to replace it. Tomorrow would be another day of the same calculations, the same careful budgeting, the same worried looks from his colleagues. But for now, he had his father's picture watching over him, the station's solid presence around him, and the knowledge that when the alarm rang, none of the other stuff mattered. In those moments, he was simply a Sullivan doing what Sullivans had always done, serving others, no matter the personal cost. The rain started just as the night shift arrived, drumming against the station's old windows with increasing intensity. Mike had just finished logging the last entry in the inventory book when the first flash of lightning illuminated the bay, followed by a rumble that seemed to shake the ancient building's foundations. "Sullivan!" Captain Rodriguez called from his office. "Before you head out, check the generator, will you? This storm's got teeth." Mike nodded, already heading toward the backup power system. The last thing they needed was to lose power during an emergency call. As he crossed the equipment bay, a sharp crack of thunder coincided with an urgent pounding on the station's side door, the one civilians rarely used. He changed direction, reaching the door just as another series of knocks echoed through the station. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could make out a figure in what appeared to be an expensive suit, now thoroughly soaked. The man who stepped inside carried himself with an unusual composure, despite his drenched state. His suit, though waterlogged, was clearly bespoke, and the watch on his wrist probably cost more than Mike made in a year. But there was something else, a wariness in his eyes that spoke of more than just seeking shelter from the storm. "Thank you," the stranger said, his accent elegant but hard to place. "I apologize for the intrusion. My car experienced some difficulties several blocks from here." He glanced back through the door, as if checking for followers. "No intrusion." "At all," Mike replied, grabbing a clean shop towel from a nearby rack. "Here. It's not much, but it'll help dry off." He noted the slight tremor in the man's hands as he accepted the towel, the way his eyes kept darting to the windows. "I'm Mike Sullivan. Would you like to sit down? Maybe some coffee to warm up?" The stranger's posture relaxed marginally. "That would be most kind. I am Ahmad." The slight pause before the name didn't escape Mike's notice. In the kitchen, Mike poured 2 cups of coffee from the perpetually brewing pot. Ahmad had taken a seat with his back to the wall, facing both exits. His expensive watch caught the fluorescent light as he wrapped his hands around the warm mug. The crystal face was cracked, Mike noticed, and the hands had stopped. "At 9:47. Bad night to be having car trouble," Mike commented, keeping his tone casual. "We can call you a taxi if you need one." A flash of something, fear, crossed Ahmad's face. "No, thank you. I prefer to wait until the storm passes, if that's acceptable." His phone remained in his pocket, untouched. Jimmy Martinez stuck his head into the kitchen. "Hey, Sul." He stopped short, taking in their visitor. His eyes widened slightly, and he reached for his own phone. "Jimmy," Mike said firmly, something in his gut telling him to intervene. "The generator still needs checking. Would you mind? I want to make sure our guest gets warmed up." Jimmy hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Sure thing." He gave Ahmad another long look before departing. The tension in Ahmad's shoulders eased slightly after Jimmy left. "You are very kind, Mr. Sullivan. Not everyone would be so unquestioning." Mike shrugged. "Station's been a shelter from storms for over 100 years. No reason to change that now." He studied his guest's face carefully. Though usually people running from something more than rain tend to have their reasons. Ahmad's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared into the dark liquid as if it might hold answers. Finally he spoke softly. "There are times when even those born to privilege must learn whom they can trust. Tonight I find myself in need of such a lesson. Before Mike could respond, Captain Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his face unusually pale. "Sullivan," he said, his voice tight. "A word?" In the hallway, Rodriguez showed him his phone screen. On it was a news alert. "Breaking. Crown Prince of Bahrain, missing after security incident at Boston diplomatic function." Below was a photo of their kitchen guest, looking considerably more polished in formal attire, complete with military decorations. "Tell me that's not who I think it is having coffee in my station," Rodriguez whispered. Mike glanced back at the kitchen, where Ahmad, His Royal Highness Prince Ahmad bin Khalifa Al Nahyan, sat cradling his coffee cup in hands that probably had never known manual labor, yet showed remarkable strength in their deliberate stillness. "Cap," Mike said quietly. "Right now, he's just someone who needed help on a bad night. Maybe that's all he needs to be for a little while." Rodriguez studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Keep him comfortable. I need to make some calls." Mike returned to the kitchen where the prince had not moved. "Coffee's getting cold," he said, as if nothing had changed. "Would you like a fresh cup?" The grateful look in Ahmad's eyes confirmed Mike's instinct. Sometimes, the noblest thing you could do was pretend not to notice another person's crown, or the weight of it. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Mike had moved Ahmad to the station's small break room, away from the windows and curious eyes. The prince sat in one of the worn armchairs that had served generations of firefighters, his expensive suit incongruous against the faded upholstery. "Your colleagues," Ahmad said, breaking a comfortable silence, "they know who I am now, don't they?" Mike nodded, settling into the chair opposite. "News travels fast, but in here you're just someone waiting out the storm." A slight smile crossed Ahmad's face. "When was the last time you met a prince, Mr. Sullivan?" "Call me Mike." He considered the question. "Well, I helped Prince Spaghetti deliver their sauce to the market down the street last month when their truck broke down. Does that count?" The joke caught Ahmad off guard, and his laughter, genuine and unguarded, transformed his entire bearing. For a moment, he wasn't a crown prince, but simply a man sharing a joke in a quiet room. "You know," Ahmad said, his smile lingering, "this is the longest conversation I've had in weeks where protocol wasn't the primary concern." He ran a finger along the crack in his watch crystal. "There was an incident at the diplomatic reception. Nothing dramatic, no assassination attempt or anything so theatrical, just a conversation I overheard about certain business arrangements that would benefit a few at the expense of many." Mike listened quietly, recognizing the weight of trust being offered. "I was expected to ignore it, to maintain diplomatic pleasantries." Ahmad's voice hardened slightly. "My father, the king, he taught me that true leadership means sometimes choosing the harder path. So I chose to be conspicuously absent from the signing ceremony tomorrow. But my security detail, they have certain obligations to the state that might outweigh my personal choices. Hence the broken watch and the wet walk," Mike concluded. "Indeed." Ahmad studied him curiously. "You're not what I expected, Mike Sullivan." "What did you expect?" "From my security briefings. American. First responders are supposed to be more aggressive, suspicious of foreigners, ready to call authorities at the first sign of irregularity." Mike shifted in his chair. "Maybe they just haven't met the right ones, or maybe they're looking at uniforms instead of people." He gestured to the room around them. "This station, it's seen a lot of history. Depression, wars, riots, celebrations. Through all of it, our job stayed the same. Help people who need it. No questions asked. Doesn't matter if they're kings or homeless. Fire doesn't care about titles, so neither do we." The prince absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "In my country, there are strict protocols about how to address royalty, yet you speak to me as an equal. Aren't we? We're both just trying to do right by the people counting on us." Mike leaned forward. "Though I admit, my challenges usually involve less international diplomacy and more creative budgeting." Ahmad's eyes caught the worn edges of Mike's uniform, the carefully polished but aging boots. "You struggle financially." The question held genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Let's just say I'm rich in job satisfaction." Mike's tone remained light, but Ahmad didn't miss the careful deflection. Before he could probe further, Captain Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. "Your Highness," he said, his formal tone a sharp contrast to the earlier casual atmosphere, "I've been in contact with the State Department. They're sending a security team to escort you to a secure location." Ahmad's face closed off, the weight of his position visibly settling back onto his shoulders. "How long?" 20 minutes, given the weather." The prince nodded, then turned back to Mike as Rodriguez withdrew. "It seems our conversation must end sooner than I'd hoped." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small leather notebook and pen, writing something quickly before tearing out the page. "Mr. Sullivan, Mike, you've shown me more genuine courtesy in 1 hour than I've received in many formal banquets. Please accept this as a token of my gratitude." Mike took the offered paper, expecting perhaps a phone number or official contact. Instead, he found a simple note in elegant handwriting. "Thank you for seeing the man before the crown. Your friend." "Ahmad, keep it," Ahmad said softly, "to remind us both that titles mean less than the truth behind them." The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the rain. Ahmad stood, straightening his still damp suit with practiced efficiency. "Until we meet again, Mike Sullivan of Boston Fire Station 61. Mike rose as well, offering his hand. "Stay safe. Ahmad of Bahrain. Try to keep your watch dry next time." Their handshake was firm, equal, a gesture between men rather than between prince and firefighter. As Ahmad was led away by stern-faced security personnel, Mike watched through the rain-streaked windows, the prince's note, a tangible reminder that sometimes the most important connections are made when all the trappings of position are washed away by an autumn storm. Mike's morning routine remained unchanged the next day, until he stepped off the bus and found news vans parked outside Station 61. The handful of reporters huddled under umbrellas barely noticed him as he walked past. His collar turned up against the lingering drizzle. Inside, the station buzzed with unusual energy. Jimmy Martinez intercepted him before he could reach his locker. "Have you seen this?" He thrust his phone at Mike, displaying a local news website's homepage. "Crown Prince's Secret Sanctuary, Royal Refuge, found at historic Boston Fire Station, below." The headline was a grainy security camera photo from the convenience store across the street, showing Ahmad's distinctive silhouette entering the station. Mike's stomach tightened. "Someone talked," Jimmy said, his voice low. "Not me, I swear, but someone called the press last night." Captain Rodriguez emerged from his office, his face grim. "Sullivan, a word." In the captain's office, morning light filtered through rain-spotted windows, illuminating a stack of messages on the desk. The mayor's office called, twice. The State Department, too. They want to know exactly what was discussed during the prince's visit. Mike met his captain's gaze steadily. "We talked about coffee and wet weather, Cap. He needed a quiet place to think, that's all." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That's what I told them, but this isn't going away." He gestured to the window where another news van was pulling up. "Whatever happened at that diplomatic function last night, it's big. Trade deals, defense contracts, millions of dollars involved. And right in the middle of it, the Crown Prince chooses our station as his hiding place." "He wasn't hiding," Mike corrected. "He was waiting for the right moment to make a point." A hint of a smile crossed Rodriguez's face. "You got all that from a conversation about coffee and weather." Before Mike could respond, the station's front desk phone rang. Rodriguez answered, listened briefly, then held out the receiver. "It's for you. Someone from the Bahraini consulate." Mike took the phone, aware of the weight of what was coming. A crisp voice with a British accent spoke. "Mr. Sullivan? I'm calling on behalf of His Royal Highness Prince Ahmad. He requests your presence at the consulate this afternoon at 2 o'clock. A car will be sent." The invitation, it was clearly not a request, hung in the air after Mike hung up. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Anything you want to tell me about that coffee conversation? Mike thought about the prince's note, still in his wallet. Maybe I made a friend. A friend? Rodriguez shook his head. Sullivan, you've got the crown prince of an oil-rich nation sending a car for you. Meanwhile, half the press corps in Boston is outside trying to figure out why he chose our station of all places. Maybe because we treated him like a person. Instead of a headline, Mike stood, straightening his uniform. Cap, I need to make a call before shift starts. My sister. She'll worry if she sees the news. Understanding softened Rodriguez's expression. Take care of it. And Sullivan? Whatever happens with all this, remember you're representing more than just yourself. This station has a century of history. Yes, sir. Mike paused at the door. You know what my father used to say about this place? The bell rings the same for everyone. I think maybe that's what the prince understood. Outside the office, the station's usual morning routine continued, despite the circus developing beyond its walls. The equipment gleamed from yesterday's. In Ventry, the brass pole caught the grey morning light, and the old station bell hung silent but ready. Mike touched its worn surface as he passed, a habit inherited from his father. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Big bro, you're trending. Call me. Below it was a social media screenshot showing thousands sharing the story of the prince and the fire station. The comments ranged from wild speculation to romantic fantasies about royal friendships. If they only knew, Mike thought, that true friendship often started with something as simple as a towel offered to a stranger on a rainy night. He pulled out the prince's note, rereading the careful handwriting. Thank you for seeing the man before the crown. The next few hours would change everything. But for now, Mike had a shift to start and a job to do. The headlines could wait. The unmarked black sedan arrived precisely at 1:45 p.m. Mike had changed into his dress uniform, the one he kept pristine for ceremonies and funerals. But the creases still showed signs of its age. He'd polished his badge until it gleamed, though, just as his father had taught him. Looking sharp, Sullivan, Jimmy called from the engine bay. Going to see your royal BFF? The teasing held no malice now, just friendly ribbing. Amazing how quickly things could change. The same crew members who'd mocked his frugality yesterday were now proudly fielding media calls about their colleague. Mike adjusted his collar one last time. Hold down the fort, and Jimmy, no more interviews about how I rescue kittens in my spare time. Hey, that story got us 10,000 views. Outside, the media presence had tripled. Cameras swung toward him as he emerged, reporters shouting questions. Firefighter. Sullivan, what did the prince tell you about the trade deal? Is it true you're being offered a position in the Royal Guard? Did Prince Ahmad discuss the diplomatic tensions with Qatar? The driver, a stern-faced man in a dark suit, opened the car door. Mike slipped inside, finding unexpected comfort in the quiet interior. As they pulled away, he caught his reflection in the tinted window. A middle-aged firefighter in a carefully maintained uniform, heading into a world he'd never imagined entering. His phone buzzed. Sarah had sent another screenshot, this time, of a morning show segment, Royal Refuge, how a Boston firefighter's kindness captured international attention. Below it she'd written, Mom and Dad would be so proud, Dad especially. The consulate occupied a stately brownstone in Back Bay. Security personnel guided Mike through a series of checkpoints, each one more formal than the last. Finally, he was led to a well-appointed study where Ahmad, now impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, stood looking out a rain-streaked window. Your Highness, Mike said, remembering protocol. Ahmad turned, smiling. Please, Mike, in here I'm still just Ahmad. He gestured to a chair. Though I'm afraid my little adventure has caused you some inconvenience. Nothing I can't handle. Though my sister's enjoying her brother's sudden fame. Ah, yes, Sarah. At Mike's startled look, Ahmad explained, I had my staff prepare a brief profile. I hope you don't mind. I was curious about the man who showed such natural dignity. He paused. They mentioned her medical condition. The treatments must be costly. Mike stiffened slightly. We manage. Ahmad raised a hand. I'm not offering charity. I'm making an observation about character. A man who sacrifices his own comfort to care for family, who maintains his pride while counting quarters. That says more about nobility than any title could. Before Mike could respond, a door opened and several official-looking men entered, led by a distinguished older gentleman in a traditional thobe. Mike Sullivan, Ahmad said formally. Please meet His Excellency Ambassador Khalid Al-Nahyan. Uncle, this is the firefighter I told you about. The ambassador studied Mike with keen eyes. My nephew speaks highly of you, Mr. Sullivan. He says, you taught him something about true service. I just did my job, Your Excellency. Indeed, the ambassador exchanged a look with Ahmad. And now perhaps we have a proposition that might allow you to do even more. Mike glanced between them, suddenly aware that this meeting was about more than just a social call. Whatever was coming would change more than just his daily routine. It would reshape his entire world. The rain continued to paint patterns on the consulate windows, but inside, the atmosphere crackled with possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a fire engine's siren wailed, a familiar sound in an increasingly unfamiliar situation. Mike straightened in his chair, ready to hear what came next, knowing that whatever it was, he'd face it with the same steady dignity that had caught a prince's attention on a stormy night. The leather-bound protocol manual landed on the consulate's mahogany table with a soft thud. Ms. Reynolds, the diplomatic attaché, adjusted her glasses and opened it to a carefully marked page. When addressing His Royal Highness in public, you must first use the full formal address. Your Royal Highness Prince Ahmad bin Khalifa Al Nahyan. Subsequent references may be shortened to Your Highness. Never make direct eye contact for more than 3 seconds. Never extend your hand first. Never. Ms. Reynolds, Ahmad interrupted, entering the room with an apologetic smile. I believe we can dispense with some of the formalities. Mr. Sullivan has already seen me soaking wet in his station's kitchen. The attaché's expression suggested this was precisely why the protocol lessons were necessary. Your Highness, the Joint Charitable Foundation announcement is tomorrow. We cannot risk— Can't risk what? Mike asked quietly. Showing that royalty and regular people can work together as equals? A heavy silence fell. Ms. Reynolds closed the manual with deliberate care. Mr. Sullivan, perhaps you don't understand. This foundation will channel millions in aid to first responders and their families. The eyes of 2 nations will be watching. Protocol exists to prevent misunderstandings. Ahmad moved to the window, his reflection overlaying the rainy Boston skyline. Tell me, Ms. Reynolds, what was the first rule my father taught me about leadership? She straightened. To maintain the dignity of the crown at all times, Your Highness. No. Ahmad turned, smiling slightly, to recognize dignity in others. Because true authority comes not from demanding respect, but from giving it. He gestured to Mike. When I entered that fire station, this man treated me with natural dignity, not because of my title, but despite it. That is what we're celebrating with this foundation. Mike thought about the station house, about his father's lessons in respect. Where I come from, protocol is simple. Everyone gets the same treatment, best we can give. Because when the alarm rings, titles don't matter. Character does. Ms. Reynolds looked between them, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Be that as it may, certain formalities must be observed. The press will scrutinize every interaction. Then let them see something real, Ahmad said. My friend, Mike will learn what protocol he needs. But we're not going to pretend we're anything other than what we are. 2 men trying to do some good in the world. Mike noticed the prince had unconsciously touched his repaired watch, the same one that had been broken during his escape from the diplomatic function. The crystal was new, but Ahmad had kept the scratched case as a reminder. How about this? Mike suggested. I'll learn all the formal titles and bows for public events. But in private meetings, we stick to what works for us. Deal? Ahmad's smile widened. Deal! Though perhaps we can skip teaching you the 17 forms of ceremonial tea service. 17? Mike shook his head. And I thought learning the station's coffee rotation was complicated. Ms. Reynolds watched their easy interaction with a mix of resignation and dawning understanding. Very well, we'll focus on essential protocols only, though I must insist you practice the proper pronunciation of His Highness's full name and title. For the next hour, Mike rehearsed formal greetings, while Ahmad occasionally corrected his Arabic pronunciation. The prince proved to be a patient teacher, and even Ms. Reynolds relaxed enough to smile at Mike's determined efforts. As the lesson wound down, Ahmad dismissed the attaché and turned to Mike. You know, in all the protocol manuals, there's nothing about what to do when you find a true friend, perhaps because you can't teach that kind of authenticity. Mike thought about the changes the past few days had brought, the media attention, the diplomatic complexities, the weight of representing not just his station, but an entire profession. Yet here, in this quiet moment, it was still just two men who had connected on a stormy night. Speaking of authenticity, Mike said, think you can handle a real firehouse lunch tomorrow? Jimmy's bringing his famous chili. Will I need diplomatic immunity? Probably, but at least there's no protocol manual for eating it. Their laughter echoed through the consulate's formal chambers, a reminder that sometimes the best traditions are the ones you create yourself. The stack of medical bills on Mike's kitchen table seemed to mock the newspaper headlines spread beside them. Boston's firefighter Prince Whisperer, from fire station to royal court, a modern fairy tale. Sarah's latest treatment invoice alone equaled 3 months of his salary. His sister's voice crackled through his phone speaker. Mike, you have to tell them. Prince Ahmad clearly values honesty. He should know why you can't accept that position they're offering. It's not that. Simple, Sarah. Mike rubbed his temples. The foundation announcement tomorrow. It's bigger than my problems. It's about helping first responders everywhere. And what about helping yourself for once? A knock at his apartment door interrupted his response. Through the security peephole, he saw Ahmad, alone, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater. Mike quickly gathered the bills into a pile. Your Highness, he said, opening the door. This is unexpected. Ahmad stepped inside, taking in the modest one-bedroom apartment with genuine interest. I dismissed my security detail for an hour. Sometimes walls have ears, even palace walls. His eyes fell on the hastily stacked papers. I'm interrupting. Something? Just some household accounting. Mike moved to put the bills away, but Ahmad's hand gently caught his arm. My friend, the prince said softly, did you think I wouldn't notice? The careful budgeting, the worn uniform, the bus fare? He released Mike's arm. Or that I wouldn't understand why a man of your integrity would hesitate to accept a position that could solve his financial troubles? Mike sank into a kitchen chair. Sarah, my sister, she was diagnosed with MS 5 years ago. The insurance helps, but the experimental treatments, he gestured to the bills. I'm not looking for charity. No, Ahmad agreed, sitting across from him. You're protecting your pride, as I protected mine when I fled that reception rather than compromise my principles. He picked up one of the bills, studying it. Tell me, what would your father say about this situation? He'd say a Sullivan stands on his own 2 feet. And what would he say about turning down help that could allow you to better serve others? Mike was silent for a long moment. Through his apartment window, he could see the lights of the city, knowing his sister was out there in her own apartment, fighting her daily battles. When I was young, Ahmad said, I once refused to accept help carrying a heavy load, insisting I could manage alone. My father watched me struggle until I finally dropped everything. Then he told me something I never forgot. True strength isn't in carrying the burden alone. It's in knowing when to share it. Sarah's voice came from the forgotten phone. He's right, big brother. Listen to the wise prince. Ahmad's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Ah, so this is the famous Sarah. Your brother speaks of you often." "Your Highness," Sarah said, "please tell my stubborn brother that accepting help isn't the same as accepting charity." "Indeed not," Ahmad agreed, "just as my accepting his help that night wasn't weakness, but wisdom." He spread his hands. "Mike, the Foundation needs someone who understands both worlds, the daily struggles of first responders and the diplomatic complexities of international aid. Who better than a man who has lived both?" Mike looked at the bills, then at the newspaper. Headlines: "I can't let this change who I am." "My friend, it's precisely who you are that makes you right for this." Ahmad stood, moving to the window. "You know, that night in the station, you saw me as just another person needing help. Do you know how rare that is in my world? How valuable?" The truth of it settled over Mike like a familiar weight, not crushing him, but grounding him. He thought of his father's lessons about service, about dignity. Maybe sometimes serving others meant first accepting help yourself. "Sarah," he said to the phone, "I'll call you back." He turned to Ahmad. "All right, let's talk about this Foundation position, but I have one condition. Name it. I keep riding the bus to work. Some things shouldn't change." Ahmad's laugh filled the small apartment. "Agreed, though perhaps we can discuss getting you a monthly pass." The consulate's morning briefing room crackled with tension. Mike sat quietly as raised voices carried through the carved wooden doors, recognizing Ahmad's distinctive tone among them. After 15 minutes, Miss Reynolds emerged, her usual composure slightly frayed. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "I'm afraid there's been a complication." Inside, Ahmad paced before a wall of monitors, displaying news channels from both America and Bahrain. Most showed the same image. Mike and the prince sharing lunch at a local diner yesterday, Ahmad in casual clothes, both men laughing over plates. "Of French fries, the Conservative Council is concerned," Ambassador Khalid said, his face grave. "They feel His Highness's recent behavior is undermining traditional protocols." "With respect," Mike began, but Ahmad cut him off. "They feel I'm undermining their authority," the prince said sharply. "Heaven forbid a royal should eat common food with common people." "Your Highness," the ambassador sighed, "you know it's more complex than that. The trade negotiations, the ones involving the corrupt deals I discovered, yes, let's discuss those." A diplomatic aide hurriedly passed the ambassador a tablet displaying an urgent message. His frown deepened. "The council is sending an official delegation. They arrive tomorrow. To babysit me?" Ahmad's smile held no warmth. "Or to ensure I understand my place. To protect the dignity of the crown," the ambassador corrected. He turned to Mike. "Mr. Sullivan, you must understand. The friendship between you and His Highness, while admirable, has become politically sensitive." Mike thought of the protocol manual, all its rules about maintaining proper distance. "You want me to step away from the Foundation?" "Temporarily," Ms. Reynolds interjected, "until matters stabilize." "No," Ahmad's voice cut through the room. "Mike stays, or I go public with everything I learned at that reception." Silence fell. The ambassador's face paled slightly. "Your Highness, threats are beneath you." "So is bowing to corruption." Ahmad moved to stand beside Mike's chair. "I chose this man as the Foundation's director because he has something our politics sadly lacks: genuine integrity." "The Council will not see it that way," the ambassador warned. "They'll say you've been influenced by Western ideas, that you're betraying our traditions." "What tradition?" Ahmad demanded. "The tradition of service to others, of recognizing dignity in all people. Those are the oldest traditions of our culture." He gestured to the news footage. "You see scandal in those images. I see hope, proof that true friendship transcends rank and culture." Mike cleared his throat. "If I may?" All eyes turned to him. "Where I come from, tradition matters too. But the strongest tradition at our station is judging people by their actions, not their titles." He stood, straightening his jacket. "If my presence is causing problems, I'll step back. but not because of pressure from people who don't understand what we're trying to build here." Ahmad's expression softened. "And that, uncle, is precisely why he must stay." In one sentence, he offered to sacrifice his position for the greater good, while making it clear he's nobody's pawn. The ambassador studied Mike with new interest. "You understand, Mr. Sullivan, that if you remain, the pressure will only increase? The council has considerable influence. I understand duty, sir, and sometimes duty means standing your ground." A ghost of a smile touched the ambassador's face. "Perhaps—" He paused as his tablet chimed again. "Ah, it seems the council members have moved up their arrival. They'll be here this evening." "Perfect," Ahmad said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority Mike had first heard in the fire station. "They can attend tomorrow's foundation announcement. Let them see firsthand what real leadership looks like." After the others filed out, Ahmad turned to Mike. "I'm sorry you've been drawn into our politics." "I'm not." Mike smiled slightly. "Though, admit handling palace intrigue wasn't covered in firefighter training. No, but standing firm in the face of pressure was." Ahmad checked his watch, the same one from that first night, its scratched case a reminder of choices made. Ready to face the dragons? Mike thought of his sister, of his station crew, of all the first responders who could benefit from this foundation. "You know what my father would say? The hottest fires forge the strongest bonds." "Your father," Ahmad said softly, "was a very wise man." Outside the consulate, reporters waited with cameras ready. But for now, in this quiet moment, two men from different worlds stood united by something stronger than protocol or politics, the simple power of doing what's right. The council delegation had barely settled into their hotel when the station's alarm bell shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Mike, who'd returned to active duty despite his new foundation role, was already pulling on his gear when Captain Rodriguez burst into the locker room. "Chemical fire at the port," he announced, his face grim. "Multiple containers. One of them's marked hazardous." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, but Mike felt an extra weight in his steps. The foundation announcement was in 6 hours. The council members would be watching, looking for any excuse to prove him unworthy of his position. As Engine 61 roared through the sleeping streets, Mike's radio crackled. "Sullivan!" The captain's voice carried over the siren's wail. "That warehouse. It's next to the Bahraini trade delegation's temporary offices." Mike's stomach tightened. Ahmad would be there early, preparing for the announcement. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the job ahead. Personal concerns had no place in emergency response. The pre-dawn sky already glowed orange when they arrived. Thick, chemical-laden smoke poured from a row of shipping containers, and dock workers pointed frantically toward the trade delegation's building. 2 staff members still inside, the security guard reported, coughing. They were preparing early for some diplomatic event. Mike's heart stopped as a familiar figure emerged from the smoke, supporting a limping colleague. Ahmad's elegant suit was soot-stained, his face streaked with grime. "Your Highness!" The security team rushed forward, but Ahmad waved them back. "There are still people in there," he said, looking directly at Mike. "Second floor, east wing." Captain Rodriguez was already barking orders. "Sullivan, Martinez, sweep and clear, full, gear by the book." Mike nodded, securing his oxygen mask. As he moved toward the building, he heard Ahmad arguing with his security detail. "Your Highness, protocol demands—" "Protocol can wait. I know the layout." Then Ahmad was beside him, grabbing a spare emergency breathing apparatus from the truck. Mike started to protest, but the prince's expression stopped him. "Your tradition is service to others, yes?" Ahmad said, properly securing the breathing gear. "Well, so is mine." Inside, the smoke hung thick and yellow. They moved methodically, Mike leading with his years of training, Ahmad following with intimate knowledge of the building's layout. They found the first staff member in a stairwell, conscious but dazed. As Mike radioed for backup, Ahmad noticed something through a window. "The chemical containers," he said urgently. "The fire's reaching the red-marked one." Mike knew what that meant. They had minutes, maybe less. "Martinez," he called into his radio. "Get that civilian clear. Everyone pull back to safe distance." But Ahmad was already moving deeper into the smoke. "There's a shelter point this way. Standard protocol for attacks. Someone might have gone there." Mike followed, every instinct screaming about the time slipping away. They found the shelter's reinforced door, locked from the inside. Ahmad called out something in Arabic, and a woman's voice responded shakily. The door opened to reveal an elderly, cleaning woman clutching a prayer rug. She burst into rapid-fire Arabic at the sight of Ahmad, who quickly helped her up. Mike's radio exploded with urgent voices. "That container's going critical. Everyone clear the area now." They were 3 floors up. The main stairs would take too long. But Mike knew this type of building, knew what to look for. "Here!" He kicked open a maintenance door, revealing the building's external fire escape. "Down! Fast!" They helped the woman onto the metal stairs, the structure swaying slightly. Above them, a deep boom shook the air. Mike looked up to see the chemical container split open, belching green-tinged flames. "Move!" He pushed Ahmad and the woman ahead of him as debris began to rain down. They descended as quickly as they dared, the metal growing hot beneath their feet. The explosion, when it came, felt like a giant's hand shoving them forward. Mike grabbed the railing with one hand, Ahmad's jacket with the other, as burning debris shot overhead. His helmet was struck hard, and something seared through his coat sleeve. Then hands were pulling them clear. The crew, the security detail, everyone working together without thought for protocol or rank. As the paramedics checked them over, Mike noticed his helmet was cracked clean through. If it had hit an inch lower, Ahmad, refusing to be separately treated, spoke quietly. "The council will say I behaved recklessly, that a prince should not risk himself." Mike touched his ruined helmet. "Maybe, or maybe you just showed them what real nobility looks like." Their eyes met in perfect understanding. In that moment, covered in soot and chemical residue, they were neither prince nor firefighter, just 2 men who'd chosen duty over safety, service over protocol. The sun was rising now, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of gold. In a few hours, they would face the council, defend their friendship and the foundation. But they would do it knowing that when it mattered most, they'd proven their critics wrong in the most fundamental way, by living the values they claimed to protect. The hospital waiting room buzzed with an unusual mix of people. Firefighters, still in their sooty gear, diplomatic security personnel in suits, and concerned officials from both countries. Mike sat with an ice pack on his burned arm, watching Ahmad speak with the elderly cleaning woman they'd rescued. The prince knelt beside her wheelchair, holding her hand as she wept and blessed him in Arabic. "She says you are both angels, Ms." Reynolds translated quietly, her earlier rigid formality softened by the morning's events. "Though I suspect the council will have a different interpretation." Mike touched the prayer beads Ahmad had pressed into his hand after the rescue. Dark, wooden beads worn smooth by years of use. The prince had pulled them from his pocket, somehow unscathed by the fire. "My father gave those to me when I first took public office," Ahmad said, returning to sit beside Mike. "He said they would remind me that all authority comes from a higher source." He smiled slightly. "I think they're better served with someone who already understands that." The elderly woman was still watching them, her eyes bright with tears. She pulled something from her belongings, a small tapestry prayer rug, edges slightly singed from the fire. Through Miss Reynolds, she insisted Mike take it. "She says a man who would risk his life alongside a prince to save a cleaner must have a beautiful soul," the attaché translated. "She wants you to have something to remind you that God sees no rank in good deeds." Mike accepted the rug carefully, its intricate patterns telling stories he couldn't yet read. "Thank her for me, and tell her that in my experience, it's usually the cleaners and cooks who know the real heart of any building." Ahmad translated this himself, causing the woman to laugh and nod vigorously. She reached out to pat both their cheeks with grandmotherly Eviction protocol entirely forgotten. You know, Ahmad said later, as they sat waiting for their final medical clearance. When I was young, I struggled with the weight of future responsibility. My father took me to spend time with our palace staff, the gardeners, the cleaners, the cooks. He said, learn from them, because they understand something many rulers forget, that true service requires both humility and dignity. Mike ran his fingers over the prayer beads. My father had a similar saying about firefighting. He said every rookie had to learn that we serve everyone equally because fire doesn't care about bank accounts or titles. Perhaps that's why this friendship worries the council so much, Ahmad mused. Not because it breaks protocol, but because it proves what they fear, that the barriers between people are artificial. The emergency room doctor arrived with their discharge papers, interrupting the conversation. But later, as they walked through the hospital's quiet corridors, Ahmad spoke again. The foundation announcement is in 2 hours. The council will be watching, looking for signs that I've been compromised by Western influence. He smiled wryly. They don't understand that what they're really seeing is a return to our oldest traditions of honoring noble character wherever it's found. Mike thought about the prayer beads in his pocket, the rug carefully wrapped in clean gauze. You know, my sister Sarah's always said that the best friendships are built on recognizing the divine spark in each other. Maybe that's what really matters, not where we pray or what titles we hold, but how we honor that spark. They reached the hospital's chapel, its doors open to all faiths. Ahmad paused, looking at the simple wooden crosses on one wall, the prayer arrows indicating the direction of Mecca on another. Would you mind if He gestured to the prayer arrows. Only if you don't mind me sitting quietly with these beads. I'm borrowing. They spent the next few minutes in peaceful silence, the prince performing his delayed morning prayers, the firefighter sitting respectfully with the prayer beads, each man honoring the other's traditions while finding comfort in their own. When they finally left the chapel, they found Miss Reynolds waiting with fresh clothes for them both. Her expression, seeing them emerge together, held new understanding. The council has convened early, she said. They're waiting at the consulate. Ahmad straightened his fresh suit. Good. Let them see what true brotherhood looks like. He touched the pocket where the prayer beads usually rode. Keep those safe for me, my friend. I think we're both going to need all the wisdom we can get. The foundation announcement went better than anyone dared hope. Perhaps it was the lingering news coverage of the fire, or the way Ahmad and Mike sat together on the stage, still bearing visible scrapes from their morning's adventure. Whatever the reason, even the council members found it difficult to object as the prince spoke passionately about duty, service, and the bonds that transcend nationality. Afterward, in the consulate's private study, Ahmad handed Mike an envelope bearing the royal seal of Bahrain. My father would like to meet you, he said simply. Mike stared at the formal invitation, its gold leaf catching the afternoon light. The king wants to meet me? After this morning's news coverage, he insisted. Ahmad's smile held a touch of mischief, though I suspect he was already curious about the American firefighter who's been teaching his son about true nobility. The ambassador, who had been quietly observing from his desk, cleared his throat. Your Highness, the council's concerns have been addressed by actions rather than words, Ahmad finished. A prince who serves alongside his people, who risks himself to save others. That's the leadership our traditions actually demand. Mike ran his fingers over the raised seal. I've never even had a passport. Already being arranged, Ms. Reynolds said, surprising them both with her supportive tone, along with appropriate attire for palace functions. She gave Mike's department store suit a meaningful look. Sarah will need care while I'm gone, Mike started, but Ahmad raised a hand. Already arranged as well. The finest MS specialists in Boston will attend her. Consider it a gesture of gratitude from a friend. Mike thought of his sister's reaction to this news, her joy at seeing him step into a larger world. How does one thank a king? By being exactly who you are, Ahmad replied, the man who saw past a title to offer simple kindness on a rainy night. The council members chose that moment to enter, led by a stern-faced elder whose traditional robes spoke of authority. To everyone's surprise, he bowed slightly to Mike. "We have consulted with His Majesty," he announced. "The king feels that, perhaps, some protocols were made to be adapted, carefully." His expression suggested this concession hadn't come easily. Ahmad's eyes sparkled. "You mean my father reminded you of how he met his own closest advisor? A shopkeeper's son who dared to tell him the truth when others wouldn't?" The council elder's lips twitched slightly. His Majesty did mention certain precedents. Mike glanced at the invitation again, remembering his father's words about the station bell ringing the same for everyone. "When do we leave?" "Next week," Ahmad said. "Though first, I believe your crew at Station 61 deserves to hear the news personally." He turned to Ms. Reynolds. "Cancel my afternoon appointments. I think it's time I properly met the people who helped shape my friend's character." The station house welcomed them with characteristic lack of ceremony. Jimmy Martinez was cleaning the engine, Captain Rodriguez was doing paperwork, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Yet there was a new respect in how they greeted both. Men, not for their titles or positions, but for what they'd proven in the morning's fire. Mike showed Ahmad his father's old locker, the worn photos inside, the history etched into every corner of the building. The prince listened with genuine interest, asking questions about traditions and pranks, about the camaraderie that made a station into a family. "You know," Ahmad said as they prepared to leave, "in Arabic we have a word, Rafiq. It means more than just friend. It means companion, one who walks beside you on life's journey." He touched the spot where his prayer beads usually rested, now carried by Mike. "I think perhaps that's what we've discovered here." Mike thought about the incredible journey ahead, from a simple fire station to a royal palace. But more than that, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this point, about how a random act of kindness on a stormy night had opened doors neither man expected. "Rafiq," he repeated carefully. "I like that." The station's old bell tolled the hour, its deep voice unchanged by time or circumstance. Just as it had welcomed a rain-soaked prince seeking refuge, now it seemed to bless this new chapter in both men's lives, a chapter that would prove that true friendship knows no borders, and that nobility of spirit speaks a universal language. Mike's first passport stamp still felt fresh as the royal motorcade glided through Manama's gleaming streets. The transition from his cramped apartment to the private jet, and now to this procession of black vehicles, seemed almost dreamlike. He touched the prayer beads in his pocket, their familiar texture grounding him in reality. "Nervous?" Ahmad asked. From the seat beside him, looking completely at home in the controlled chaos of the diplomatic arrival. "Let's see," Mike smiled. "I'm about to meet a king. I'm wearing more expensive clothes than I've owned in my life, and I just flew 8,000 miles from the only city I've ever really known. Why would I be nervous?" The prince laughed. "Just remember, my father was once a young man who had to learn leadership just as I did. That's why he understands the value of people who speak truth without fear." Outside the car windows, Bahrain's capital revealed itself in layers of old and new. Ancient markets nestled against soaring glass towers, traditional dhows bobbing in a harbor filled with luxury yachts. The morning call to prayer echoed from distant minarets, mixing with the sounds of modern traffic. "Different from Boston?" Ahmad asked, watching Mike take it all in. "The tallest thing in my neighborhood is the station's flagpole." Mike paused as they passed a group of firefighters outside a modern fire station. "Though some things look familiar," Ahmad followed his gaze. "Ah, yes. Perhaps we should arrange a visit. I'm sure they'd be interested in American firefighting techniques, and I'd love to learn theirs." Mike watched the station disappear behind them. Fire speaks the same language everywhere, but every department has its own ways of answering. The Motorcade turned onto a palm-lined avenue leading to the palace gates. Mike had seen photos during his preparation briefings, but the reality of the royal residence, a masterpiece of Islamic architecture set against the blue Gulf waters, took his breath away. "Welcome to my home," Ahmad said softly as they passed through the gates, "though I suspect you'll find the people inside more interesting than the building." The welcome committee awaiting them included both ceremonial guards in traditional dress and palace staff in modern uniforms. Ms. Reynolds, who had flown ahead to arrange details, stepped forward to guide Mike through the protocol they'd rehearsed. But before the formal greetings could begin, an older man in simple traditional dress emerged from the palace doors. The entire assembly bowed deeply. Even Ahmad straightened his posture. "Father," he said warmly, "I thought we were meeting formally in an hour." King Khalifa's eyes crinkled with humor. A father can't greet his son, an honored guest, informally. "You first?" He turned to Mike, his gaze direct and assessing. "Mr. Sullivan, my son tells me you taught him something about true service." Mike began to bow as rehearsed, but the king waved it away. No, we will have enough ceremony later. For now, I wish to hear about the night you offered shelter to a prince without knowing his title, and perhaps about this morning's fire that has my security chief adding grey hairs." As they walked into the palace, the king leading them to a private sitting room, Mike felt the weight of protocol lifting slightly. Here was a father eager to hear about his son's experiences, a leader interested in unvarnished truth. The room they entered was surprisingly modest compared to the palace's grand exterior. Comfortable cushions surrounded a low table set with coffee and dates. The king gestured for them to sit. "Now," he said, switching to English that was slightly more accented than his son's, "tell me about your father, Mike Sullivan. Ahmad says he taught you much about honor and service." Mike touched the prayer beads again, remembering his father's lessons. As he began to speak, he noticed Ahmad watching with quiet satisfaction, as if this moment, this simple, honest conversation between a king and a firefighter, was exactly what he had hoped for. Through the windows, the Gulf waters sparkled under the morning sun. The call to prayer had faded, replaced by the subtle sounds of palace life. In this quiet room, three men from vastly different backgrounds found common ground in their shared understanding of duty, service, and the weight of responsibility. And, somewhere in Boston, an old station bell tolled the hour, its sound echoing through a century of tradition, bridging the distance between two worlds that were perhaps not so different after all. Palace life, Mike discovered, operated like a perfectly choreographed dance, one where he frequently found himself stepping on toes, yet somehow his missteps were beginning to change the rhythm of the dance itself. No, he said to the row of suited officials waiting outside Ahmad's study. His Highness doesn't need 17 different briefings on the Foundation launch. Let's combine them into one meeting. He gestured to his ever-present notebook where he'd sketched out a firefighter's efficiency diagram. Think of it like an emergency response. Streamlined communication saves lives. To his surprise, the officials not only agreed, but seemed relieved. Even Ms. Reynolds, who had accompanied them to Bahrain, was beginning to appreciate his practical approach. "You're disrupting centuries of tradition," she said later, though her tone held more amusement than censure. "Yet somehow things are running more smoothly. Where I come from, tradition means doing what works, then making it better." Mike adjusted the traditional thobe he now wore for palace functions. Besides, Ahmad seems happier with fewer layers between him and the people he's trying to help. Indeed, the prince had thrown himself into the foundation work with renewed energy. Today, they were visiting the Manama Fire Academy, where Ahmad insisted on trying the training equipment himself. "Your Highness," the academy's director protested, "surely you don't mean to," but Ahmad was already donning protective gear, following Mike's practiced movements. If I'm to understand the needs of our emergency services, I should experience their training firsthand, yes? The resulting photos, the prince and the American firefighter running drills alongside Bahraini cadets, made headlines in both countries. More importantly, they sparked earnest discussions about modernizing emergency response training across the region. You see, King Khalifa said that evening, showing Mike a report on the day's events. Sometimes it takes an outsider's eyes to help us see our own strengths more clearly. They sat in the king's private study, where Mike had been surprised to find himself increasingly welcome. The room's walls held both ancient manuscripts and modern screens displaying news and data feeds, a perfect reflection of the balance Bahrain was trying to strike. "Your Majesty," Mike ventured, "I've been thinking about the Foundation's next phase, the exchange program we discussed." "Ah, yes, sending our firefighters to train in Boston and bringing American expertise here." The king smiled. "The council actually approved it yesterday, perhaps because they heard how you handled the palace kitchen incident." Mike flushed slightly at the memory. A small fire in the palace kitchens. Nothing serious, but his instinctive response had impressed the staff. He'd organized the evacuation with calm efficiency, treating everyone from royal family to dishwashers with equal concern for their safety. "A leader who serves," the king mused, "teaches others to serve better." He indicated a chess set nearby. "Do you play?" "Your Majesty, I barely understand which way the pieces move." "Perfect. Then you won't feel bound by traditional strategies." The king began setting up the board. "You know, when Ahmad was young, his tutors tried to let him win. I put a stop to that immediately. Better he should learn that true respect means treating someone as an equal, even in defeat." As they played, with the king patiently explaining moves, Mike thought about how his own world had expanded. The prayer beads in his pocket clinked softly against his father's old watch, a deliberate choice to wear it today, bridging his two worlds. "Check," the king said kindly, then noticed Mike's distraction. "Something troubles you?" "Just thinking about Sarah, my sister. We had our weekly video call this morning. The new treatments are helping." "Ah, yes. Dr. Reynolds, Ms. Reynolds's brother, sends excellent reports, though perhaps we should arrange for her to receive treatment here. Bahrain's medical facilities are among the world's finest." Mike looked up sharply. "Your Majesty, that's too much, is it?" The king's eyes twinkled. "Or is it simply what family does for family?" The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Before Mike could respond, Ahmad burst in, waving a tablet excitedly. "Father Mike, you need to see this. The Manama Fire Academy has received over 1,000 new applications since this morning's visit, from women as well as men." The king looked at the tablet, then at his son's glowing face, and finally at Mike. "It seems, Mr. Sullivan, that you are teaching us all something about breaking down barriers. Now shall we finish our game? I believe. You still have a few moves before checkmate." Outside, the sun was setting over the Gulf, painting the sky in colors that reminded Mike of Boston's autumn evenings. Two worlds bridged by understanding, respect, and the simple truth that service knows no rank. The emergency alert came during a formal state dinner. Mike's phone, which he'd insisted on keeping active despite protocol, buzzed with a specific tone he'd never wanted to hear. Captain Rodriguez's message was brief but devastating. "Station. 61 explosion, multiple casualties, critical response needed." Across the ornate dining table, he caught Ahmad's eye. The prince recognized his expression immediately and made a subtle gesture to his aide. Within moments, both men had quietly excused themselves from the gathering. "How bad?" Ahmad asked as they hurried to the palace's communications center. "Bad. Enough that Cap broke radio silence to reach me here." Mike was already loosening his formal collar, the weight of 8,000 miles pressing down on him. "The station, Ahmad, my home." The communications center erupted into activity as they entered. Multiple screens showed international news feeds, all carrying the same shocking footage. Station 61 partially collapsed, flames pouring from its century-old windows. The historic bell tower listed dangerously. Gas line rupture, Rodriguez explained. Via video link, his face smoke-stained. Half the crew is down. Jimmy's critical. He was closest to the blast. He paused, grief evident even through the grainy connection. Mike, the old photo wall. Your father's pictures. 100 years of history, of tradition, of family legacy, all going up in flames. Mike felt Ahmad's hand grip his shoulder. I have a plane standing by, the prince said quietly. Say the word. But before Mike could respond, another screen lit up with an urgent diplomatic alert. The council's spokesman appeared, his face grave. Your Highness, the trade agreement signing ceremony is in 12 hours. Your father, His Majesty, has taken ill. Nothing serious, he added quickly, but he requires rest. As Crown Prince, protocol demands you preside over the signing. Ahmad's grip on Mike's shoulder tightened. Surely, given the circumstances, the spokesman cut in, include 7 nations' delegations, billions in contracts, and the stability of regional relations. Your Highness, you cannot be seen abandoning your duties for— He glanced at Mike apologetically. For a foreign fire station. Mike watched the footage of his burning home, remembering every inch of those walls, every name on the memorial plaques. Jimmy Martinez, who had once mocked his frugality, now lay, injured because he'd been doing the job they both loved. Go, Ahmad said suddenly. Take the plane. I'll handle things here. Your Highness. The spokesman's voice rose. The political ramifications will be nothing compared to betraying the principles this foundation was built upon. Ahmad turned to the room's staff. Clear the prince's jet for immediate departure. Alert Boston authorities that emergency response support is incoming. The spokesman played his final card. The council will see this as proof that your American friend has divided your loyalties. Everything we've built could unravel. Mike felt the weight of the prayer beads in his pocket. Ahmad's gift, symbol of their unlikely friendship. Ahmad, he's right. I can't let you risk everything we've— My father, Ahmad interrupted, taught me that a leader's first duty is to recognize what truly matters. He smiled slightly. I believe a wise firefighter once told me something similar. But the trade agreements will mean nothing if I abandon my principles the moment they're tested. Ahmad turned to his staff. Prepare the jet, and get me the council on a secure line. I'll explain my decision personally. The spokesman looked stricken. Your Highness, please, at least wait until after the ceremony. Surely a few hours, Mike said quietly, can be the difference between life and death in our work. He met Ahmad's eyes. But so can keeping your word to your people. My friend, you taught me about your traditions. Let me honor mine. Mike straightened his shoulders. A Sullivan stands his ground. The station will still need help after your ceremony. Ahmad studied him for a long moment, understanding passing between them. Then he turned to his staff. New plan. Prepare 2 jets. One leaves immediately with Mr. Sullivan and whatever emergency support we can muster. The second stands ready for my departure the moment the ceremony ends. He faced the spokesman. The council wants proof of my commitment to duty. They shall have it, by seeing that duty extends beyond borders and protocols. The room burst into activity. As preparations began, Ahmad pressed something into Mike's hand, a second set of prayer beads, these made of deep blue stones. My father gave me these when I first understood what leadership truly meant, the prince said softly. It seems fitting. They should be with you now. Mike clutched the beads, feeling their weight. I'll see you in Boston. Count on it. Ahmad embraced him quickly. Now go. Your family needs you. As Mike hurried toward the waiting jet, he carried with him more than just prayer beads and friendship. He carried the proof that true nobility knows no borders, and that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that prove who we really are. The royal jet landed at Logan Airport under a smoke-stained dawn. Emergency vehicles from across Boston had converged on Station 61, their lights painting the neighborhood in rotating reds and blues. The old bell tower still stood, though barely, its silhouette a broken tooth against the skyline. Mike emerged from the jet into organized chaos. A trauma team from Bahrain's premier medical center had accompanied him, along with emergency response equipment that would have taken American departments months to requisition. The king's influence, even from a sickbed, worked miracles. Captain Rodriguez met him at the perimeter, his face gray with exhaustion. Jimmy's stabilized. Others too. But the station... He gestured helplessly at the gutted building. Mike touched both sets of prayer beads in his pocket. Buildings can be rebuilt. How's morale? Better now that you're here, though I have to ask. Rodriguez nodded toward the sophisticated Bahraini medical equipment being unloaded. How did you manage this? Let's just say I've learned that friendship knows no borders. Mike surveyed the damage, already planning. What do you need first? For the next several hours, Mike coordinated between Boston firefighters and Bahraini medical personnel, two worlds merging seamlessly in crisis. The station's archives, including his father's photographs, had been saved by quick-thinking crew members. Even the old bell, though damaged, had survived. Sarah arrived mid-morning, moving more easily than Mike had seen in months. "The new treatments," she explained, hugging him. "Your prince's doctors are miracle workers." She studied his face. "Speaking of which, have you seen the news?" On her phone, footage showed Ahmad at the trade ceremony, handling proceedings with diplomatic grace. But in his formal speech, he had deviated from protocol to address the Station 61 crisis directly. "Today we sign agreements worth billions," the prince was saying, "but the true measure of any nation's wealth lies in its people's character. Even now, emergency responders in Boston demonstrate the courage and sacrifice that inspire our foundation's mission. They remind us that service knows no nationality, and that the noblest traditions are those that unite us in times of crisis." The council members behind him looked uncomfortable, but the assembled diplomats were nodding in approval. The speech was already being praised as a masterpiece of modern leadership. "He's risking everything," Mike said softly. "His position, his influence." "For the same reasons you'd run into a burning building for a stranger," Sarah replied. "Because it's right." A commotion at the perimeter drew their attention. Police escorts were arriving, lights flashing. From a diplomatic vehicle emerged Ahmad, still in his formal attire from the ceremony, looking like he hadn't slept. "I told you I'd come," he said simply, embracing Mike. Then, surveying the scene, "Where do you need me?" For the next few hours, the Crown Prince of Bahrain worked alongside Boston firefighters, clearing debris and cataloguing salvaged equipment. His security detail watched in resigned acceptance as he got his hands dirty, his expensive clothes ruined by ash and water damage. News cameras captured it all. The prince and the firefighter working together to save a century of tradition. But they missed the quiet moments. Ahmad and Mike discovering a charred piece of the station's original wooden door frame, both men handling it with reverence. The prince listening intently to old-timers' stories of the station's history. Mike teaching him the proper way to coil a fire hose. As sunset approached, the immediate crisis had stabilized. The injured were receiving world-class care, and preliminary plans for rebuilding were already taking shape. Mike found Ahmad staring up at the damaged bell tower. "The council is probably having fits," Mike said. "Let them," my father called. "He's seen the coverage." Ahmad smiled. He said sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to show its relevance to the present. Smart man, your father. He also said to tell you that Station 61's rebuilding costs will be the Foundation's first major project. Consider it a gesture of international cooperation. Mike thought about protesting, but he understood now that true friendship sometimes means accepting help gracefully. Instead, he touched the prayer beads, both sets, in his pocket. "You know what this means," he said finally. We'll have to incorporate some Arabian architectural elements into the design. Can't have the council thinking we're not representing both cultures." Ahmad laughed, the sound echoing off the damaged walls. "Perhaps a subtle geometric pattern in the brickwork? And we'll need a proper space for prayer, of course, for all faiths, and a teaching area for international exchanges. Now, you're thinking like a diplomat." Mike looked at his beloved station, seeing not just what was lost, but what could be rebuilt, something that would bridge worlds and traditions, just as an unlikely friendship had done. "No," he said softly, "just thinking like someone who's learned that the best traditions are the ones we build together." 6 months later, the transformed Station 61 rose against the Boston skyline. Traditional red brick now incorporated subtle Islamic geometric patterns, their interlocking designs suggesting unity and connection. The rebuilt bell tower housed both the restored historic bell and a new one, a gift from Bahrain's firefighters, its brass surface etched with calligraphy that read, "Service knows no borders," in both English and Arabic. Mike stood in the new community center wing, watching a group of Bahraini firefighters demonstrate their techniques to Boston colleagues. The exchange program had exceeded everyone's expectations, with waiting lists on both sides of the ocean. "They're asking if we can expand the program," Captain Rodriguez said, joining him at the window. "Every department in New England wants, in the Middle East too. Good thing we built this place bigger than the original." Mike smiled, remembering the council's initial skepticism about the expansion plans. But Ahmad had stood firm, insisting that a proper bridge between cultures needed space to grow. Sarah entered, walking smoothly with just a slight support from her cane. The experimental treatments from Bahrain had worked better than anyone dared hope. "Someone's going to be late for the dedication ceremony," she teased. The ceremony would mark the official opening of the International First Responders Training Institute, a name that still amazed Mike every time he saw it on the building's facade. But first, he had a more personal mission. In the station's new memorial hall, Mike carefully hung the final photograph, his father's image beside the old bell, now joined by a recent picture of Boston and Bahraini firefighters training together. Between them hung the charred but intact prayer rug from the elderly cleaning woman, who had insisted it belong in this place of honor. "Perfect timing," Ahmad's voice came from behind him. The prince had arrived quietly, wearing a formal uniform that combined traditional Bahraini elements with international firefighting insignia. "Though you forgot one." He handed Mike a framed photograph, the moment they'd first met, captured by the station's security camera. Their expressions were obscured by rain and darkness, but something about the image captured the essence of their story. Two men seeing past titles to recognize something worthy in each other. "The council actually suggested this one," Ahmad said, enjoying Mike's surprise. "They said it represents the moment traditional values found modern expression. I think they're finally understanding what we've built here." Outside, guests were arriving for the ceremony. Through the window, Mike could see diplomatic vehicles mixing with fire trucks, formal uniforms alongside turnout gear. The mayor chatted with Bahraini officials while firefighters from both nations demonstrated equipment for wide-eyed school children. "Remember when they used to laugh about the broke firefighter?" Sarah said softly, joining them. "Now look what you've built." "What we've built," Mike corrected, touching the prayer beads he still carried. "All of us." The new community center had already become a symbol of possibility. Beyond emergency services training, it hosted cultural exchanges, youth programs, and medical research collaborations. The Foundation's work had inspired similar initiatives worldwide, proving that the bonds of service transcended national boundaries. "My father says this is how lasting change happens," Ahmad observed, "not through grand proclamations, but through personal connections that grow into bridges between worlds." The king had recovered fully and remained one of their strongest supporters. His own friendship with Mike had sparked changes in palace protocols. making room for more direct engagement between royalty and the people they served. You know what Dad would say about all this? Sarah gestured to the bustling facility. Mike smiled. That the station bell rings the same for everyone? That, and it's about time the world caught up with what firefighters have always known. We're all one family under the smoke. The ceremony would celebrate this truth formally, but the real triumph was in the daily reality. Boston kids learning Arabic from Bahraini firefighters, Middle Eastern emergency technicians training in the latest Western methods, barriers falling with each shared lesson and laugh. They're ready. For us, Ms. Reynolds appeared, now as comfortable coordinating with firefighters as with diplomats. And yes, Your Highness, we've kept the speeches short, as requested. Ahmad grinned. Mike's influence. He taught me that the best traditions adapt. As they walked toward the ceremony, Mike paused for one last look at the memorial wall. The old and new photos, the prayer rug, the saved pieces of history, all testified to the power of seeing past surface differences to recognize shared values. You know, he said quietly, when I was counting quarters for bus fare, I never imagined this. Ahmad clasped his shoulder. That's the beauty of true friendship, my brother. It shows us possibilities we never knew existed. 1 year to the day after a rain-soaked prince sought shelter at Station 61, Mike stood in the rebuilt station's kitchen, counting quarters. This time, though, they weren't for bus fare. He was teaching a group of young firefighters how to operate the new coffee fund, a tradition he'd insisted on keeping despite the station's grander status. But Mr. Sullivan, one of the Bahraini trainees, protested, surely with the Foundation's resources. Some traditions matter, Mike explained, lining up the quarters. This one reminds us that service isn't about fancy equipment or big budgets. It's about taking care of each other, one cup at a time. The familiar toll of the station bell, both bells now, their voices harmonizing in different tones, interrupted the lesson. But it wasn't an emergency call. The sounds announced a visitor, one who had developed a habit of dropping by unannounced when his schedule allowed. Ahmad entered the kitchen, wearing his firefighter training gear rather than princely attire. He'd earned his basic certification last month, insisting on completing the same training as any other recruit. Now he regularly joined drills when visiting Boston, while Mike did the same at Manama's Central Station during his frequent trips to Bahrain. Coffee fund lessons? Ahmad grinned, adding his own quarters to the collection. Good. The council was worried we'd lost all fiscal responsibility with the Foundation's success. The Foundation had indeed flourished beyond anyone's expectations. What began as a friendship between a prince and a firefighter had sparked a global movement in emergency services cooperation. But here in the station kitchen, with the coffee percolating and quarters clinking, titles still meant less than the simple act of sharing a cup with friends. Your father's asking when you're next coming to the palace, Ahmad said, accepting a mug. He says the chess set feels neglected, Mike smiled, remembering his early awkward games with the king. Now there, matches had become a quiet tradition, a time for discussions that bridged cultures and generations. Tell him I'll be there next week. Sarah has a checkup with the medical team anyway. His sister had become something of a celebrity at the Bahraini hospital, her successful treatment inspiring a new international medical cooperation program. She now helped coordinate support services for other patients receiving cross-cultural care. The kitchen filled with the next shift's crew, a mix of Boston veterans and international trainees. Jimmy Martinez, fully recovered and now a training supervisor, was teaching proper equipment maintenance to firefighters from 3 continents. You know what this reminds me of? Ahmad said softly, watching the easy interaction among the diverse group. That first night when you offered a stranger a towel and coffee, no questions asked. Just doing my job, Mike replied, but they both knew it was more than that. It had always been about seeing the person behind the title, the shared humanity. Behind cultural differences, The station's daily rhythm continued around them. Equipment checks, training rotations, the constant readiness that defined their profession. But now that rhythm carried echoes of multiple traditions, enriched by the differences each person brought to their shared mission. Through the window, they could see the station's new sign, "Catching the Morning Sun." Below the traditional Boston Fire Department shield, Arabic script mirrored the English letters. Children from the neighborhood had taken to running their fingers over both, learning that different languages could tell the same story of service and dedication. Mike touched the prayer beads he still carried, both sets now, one from each pivotal moment in their friendship. Ahmad wore his father's watch, the scratch case preserved as a reminder of choices made and bridges built. Hard to believe it all started with a broken watch and some counted quarters, Mike mused. Not really, Ahmad replied. It started with something much older, the tradition of offering shelter to a stranger. You just helped remind us all that the noblest traditions are the ones that bring people together. The bells tolled again, this time a real call. Without hesitation, Ahmad moved to the equipment lockers alongside the others. Prince or not, when the bell rang, everyone served. Mike watched his friend don protective gear with practiced ease, remembering a rain-soaked night that seemed both yesterday and a lifetime ago. The station had changed, they had changed, but the core truth remained. Dignity isn't found in titles or traditions, but in how we serve each other. The old station bell and its new companion rang out across Boston's morning sky, their different tones blending into a single call to service. In their harmony, you could hear the story of two men who proved that the strongest traditions are the ones we build together, one act of kindness at a time.